Hey, deserving listeners, Natalia Grace. Sometimes people will tell me that the closed captioning will say the weirdest thing, like, hey, German listeners, or hey, demented listener. I don't know. So maybe I should start saying, hey, deserving listeners. Did YouTube get it? Hey, deserving listeners. I'm just trying to add some levity to this very dark situation that we're watching. Let's watch.
You were an accomplice of it all, too.
If Christine was his so-called monster, he could have fought her. I couldn't.
What was the conversation about dropping me off in the apartment? What was that conversation?
So I think they're editing this, which would make sense. I'm guessing he's going to say that it was completely out of his control. It was something that Christine, engineered very quickly. And then after you were dropped off, she said, she told me not to help you. But that doesn't answer the question as to, one, why didn't you come more often to help me? Two, why didn't you seriously escalate things with your wife to save me and possibly leading to divorce, right? Did you do anything? Because at the very least, he could have been over there more often. Now, he might say, well, she was abusive, she was horrible. But he hasn't really demonstrated that her abuse resulted in him having zero agency and zero ability to do. Plus, I don't know if Christine actually would have been upset with him for that, because she might even be happy. Yeah, keep her going over there as long as she's gone or something, unless she was hell-bent on trying to get her killed. But I don't know if we know that for sure. I don't know, but let's see what he says.
Just what happened?
You have to understand there's not a lot of conversation. There's a lot of dictating.
Did you know that she was getting me an ID?
Yes, I did. At that point in time, legally, your age had been altered by the state. You, like anybody else, need to have an ID.
Okay, let's step back.
Okay. Yeah, he's avoiding. I imagine this meeting is going to be frustrating, particularly for her.
Whose idea was it?
Was what?
What do you think she's talking about? Work with her, huh? What are you talking about?
I did tell all these guys we're not getting into that subject.
Yeah, it's very possible that his legal counsel told him, don't get into these things. And him and his lawyer probably even went to the production and said, I'm not going to talk about this, I'm not going to talk about that. It makes it, it's hard for us, and particularly for her, because we want answers, or we want some kind of something to see. But it's weird that he even agreed to do this sort of thing. It's weird that he even agreed to be the documentary to begin with, honestly, because Christine didn't. And, one calculation you can make at the beginning of all this is, I don't want to be in if I'm not in the documentary and Christine isn't in the documentary, then maybe they won't make a documentary because arguably 75% of the footage is of him talking, Anyway, but he could have said, I'm going to exonerate myself, who knows. But this is, it's just frustrating to watch.
Why can't you say it?
Did you guys not cover these parameters?
Now, there are other things that he could just generate from himself. Does he not have anything he wants to say? Now, I'm guessing that my role-played apology would not be on the table regarding his lawyer. And, if you apologize, then you are admitting something. So there's that. So I guess the only thing that the lawyer and Michael are saying is okay to talk about is that we were both victims, but I can't talk about how you were victimized. I can only talk about, so the only thing I can talk about in this interview is about how I was victimized. That's the only thing we can talk about? Why are you there?
You know me. Not a good.
And I just want to say that I have been in situations that are analogous to this, where the law and or lawyers, judges, police officers are telling a parent one thing, but because the parent has an overwhelming desire or urge or drive to love on their child, they go counter to all of the advice and they love their child. There's some affection. So that's not happy. Just, you would think in this moment he would say, okay, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but or figure some way around. Like I'm trying to imagine what he's been told that he can't say. And I don't know the legal landscape. I do know that he was already acquitted, right? He's found out guilty, whatever the language is. So he can't be tried again for that, but he could be tried for other things. So there's that. But he is, and he's probably facing that. That I could imagine that happening after this season. So that is a concern of his, which is fine. That's normal. It's not great that criminals get away with that or they concern themselves with saving themselves, but that's pretty normal. But I'm just trying to think, okay, given what I imagine is what are the barriers? What else could he say in this moment that could generate from him? She's asking questions, but he could just say, okay, it's hard for me to answer that question because of some legal things, but I do want to say, I'm trying to think what he could say that would, well, he could say, I loved you. I don't know if I love you anymore because of the way that I think about love, but I did in the beginning, and we had some great times together. And I worked a lot, but I did see you, and we had fun, and we laughed, you and the boys, and even Christine, we had some good times, and I think fondly on those times. And I think I was influenced to believe that you were worse than you were, and like a lot worse, and I pulled away from you emotionally, and that hurts, because as your father, that hurts me, and I'm so sorry for that. That's not admitting any kind of crime, right? That's something that would be, you can't charge someone for that, right? So you would just think that the overwhelming desire and the drive of a parent or human being to reach out would be there. And the fact that it's not, I think it does say something. What does it say? Well, for people, if we go with the hypothesis of histrionic personality, then individuals with this personality disorder will have impaired empathy. They have empathy, but it's impaired, and it's also primordial because it hasn't developed and aged normally. So their empathy is very childlike, but it's there. But it's unrefined. It's not very wise. They don't feel responsible for others because that is the there's empathy when you're 5, but eventually you start actually feeling like you're your brother's keeper, so to speak. You are there, you can do something to help others, and especially if you hurt others, then there's a greater sense of responsibility and empathy. And with histrionic, and I don't know if he has it, but for the people that go through the precursors to that, the traumas, the relational traumas, which is often neglectful, sometimes abusive, then they often are on a constant treadmill of trying to get attention for safety, and they generally feel this ongoing sense of danger and that they have been treated wrongly by originally their family, their parents, and then by everyone past that. Whether they were actually treated wrongly or not as an adult, they are just in that state, right? They're sad, they're threatened. If someone had just came out of a robbery or something where they had a gun to their head, you don't expect them to have a lot of empathy for people. Well, for people with borderline and histrionic and to some extent narcissistic people, they're in that kind of constant state. It's a normal state for them to be in. And so their empathy is impaired in that way because they're in a constant state of relational danger. They also tend to not have a lot of self-awareness about this and also their emotions and their reactivity. They also tend to have a childlike understanding of responsibility, especially when it comes to situations like this. If I just told you this whole scenario and I didn't say that he was the dad and I didn't say that he was his age, I didn't describe him visually, if you just heard the story, I think most people would assume he's not the dad. He must be like an older brother or a younger brother or something. You know, the way he's coming across, it's just like, hey, why? You know, if he were 10 years old in this seat, we wouldn't hold him accountable. We wouldn't yell at him. We like he's 10. You know, he doesn't have that sense of empathy or responsibility. So people with histrionic personality disorder, especially when they're pushed into a corner, will exhibit that kind of what from the outside would look like as cruelty and callousness, or at the very least, lack of concern for other people's feelings. It's not because at the foundation they're psychopathic and have no empathy. It's because of the impairment and the childlike nature of the empathy to begin with. Doesn't let him off the hook. It just might explain why. Because the other thing is, if he truly is trying to preserve his image, which of course anyone in his shoes would be concerned with, not just criminals, then there's a much more logical presentation. You know, you think he would have thought about that. You know, the other thing is why did you agree to do this if this is all that you were willing to do, which also points to not only histrionic, but, and maybe a desire to be in front of the camera, but because it is narcissistic. You know, people with histrionic are narcissistic. They have a narcissistic streak. It's not narcissistic personality disorder. But anyway, so he also, as I've been hypothesizing, might, and I can't know, it's total speculation, that he learned as a child to defer to other people because that's what was safe. And so when people ask him to do things, he's like, okay. Especially if you have producers that are kind of breathing down your neck, you know, and especially if they're giving you a lot of approval. Like, I think your story's really great, or whatever they do to him. Who knows? I don't know. But it's just kind of, it's interesting to see this case because there's a lot of shooting himself in the foot. And I'm just wondering what blind spots and what defenses and needs that he has that's driving this whole thing. That's pretty fascinating, actually. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So I've found that most people would benefit by getting things off of their chest. With all the pressures that we're under, it just feels good to get some relief now and then, you know? It especially feels good if someone is there to listen to us, someone who really cares about us. And, you know, keeping these things bottled up can cause various problems. Along these lines, therapy can be a wonderful place to talk openly about what is plaguing us. I mean, one of the main reasons I became a therapist is because when I was 19, I wanted to get things off of my chest. I had friends and family to talk to, but I found that I wanted to talk to a third party, an objective third party, like a therapist. Well, one place you can find a therapist is BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Just admit it.
A lot of things would have been different if they would have maybe just sent me back.
There were some ground rules going into this, and one of them was that the re-aging is off topic. That is off the table, not to be discussed.
I want to stay away from things that might be too emotional.
So now he's just lying. I think, who knows? I don't know if he's lying, but he could be. The other thing to think about in terms of the timeline is, this is just my layperson's point of view because I'm not a lawyer, but he was not found guilty in his criminal hearing because the whole premise was that Natalia was 22 at the time of the crimes and not 8 or 9 years old. So at this point, he hasn't seen the second season of the documentary, right? So at their timeline, you know, the whole foundation of him not being in prison right now is staying in the world that she's older. And if we get into the nitty-gritty there, that could be overturned, right? I think if he knew how much data they have, the documentarians, and how much data she has, that they knew that she wasn't 22 then at the time of the crimes, then I'm guessing he might, but maybe not. Maybe it would still be advisable. It's like, don't get into that, because if you get into it, you're going to reveal things. You know, that would be, I think, sound legal advice of, you know, you can get into that topic of the 22 or 8 years old thing, but because you're speaking off the cuff, you might reveal something like you knew that she wasn't 22, or you suspected she wasn't 22, or you'll be backed into a corner where any answer other than at least you suspected she wasn't 22 is ridiculous. And if that happens, then you could absolutely be implicated and thrown in jail because of previous statements that you've made or whatever, and that I could see that. But again, there's other topics that he could generate. He's a grown man. He can say, look, I can't talk about that. I'm really sorry. It's a legal thing. I don't know. I want to get into it with you, but I don't understand everything, and I can't get into it. But I do want to say these things. I do want to ask, how was it for you? Some kind of, why not ask that question?
But you know what, though?
Touchy, that's all.
Okay, well, we're gonna step away from that because I got a lot of questions. Okay.
And again, she is just showing so much poise and maturity and differentiation, and that's such a weird dynamic.
Why not just put me up for adoption again?
Unfortunately, the real answer for that lies in Evil's head. I can make a couple assumptions that are pretty good ones.
Yeah, so I'm guessing he's actually telling the truth here, and that's a great question. My wife asked that question too. She has been watching this upstairs while I've been watching this here. And then after, at night, we're just like, so then this happened, oh my God. And by the way, I will say that she has helped me to see and understand things because, two heads are better than one. So part of what I'm saying is actually absolutely influenced by her. But so anything weird I said, it's because she's just joking. I don't want to be like him. So he is saying that, well, I can make some guesses. Yeah. And now he could have tried. He's a grown man. He could have also said, well, let's move for adoption. So he's not completely under the thumb of Christine. But yeah, I think at the time he was completely deferring to her. So I guess another angle here is that if we go with the hypothesis that he is a people pleaser, and especially when someone is tagging him along, like manipulating, she would only give him love or maybe sex when he was a good boy, which we could imagine, right? And then he's more and more in this state of just like, whatever she wants, I need to just pay attention to it. And then horrible abuse is happening to Natalia, which was giving him some inkling of, wait, maybe I shouldn't be pleasing Christine all the time. Maybe I should actually be stepping away and looking at the situation. But because of his issue, whether it's histrionic or some other related thing that is a result of whatever went on in his childhood, that urge, that motivation to say, well, wait, maybe I should figure out a big picture issue here and maybe look towards pushing back on Christine, like actually, let's not put her in an apartment. Let's not try to get her to be 22. Maybe let's think about having her adopted by another family, because that'll solve the problem, right? And I'm guessing that he would speculate that Christine would think that would go against her image. It's kind of weird though, right? Because what's better for your image if it gets out that you had a kid in your house that was like the kid from Orphan? You would think actually having her in another home would actually almost be the best case scenario for her, because, she could spin the story, Christine. She could say, look, things didn't work out because she, exhibited some medical and behavioral issues that we just weren't equipped to deal with. But that would go against what I believe to be her persona that she was trying to push, that she's this magical mother that can, with her magic wand, can turn a special needs kid into a genius that's going to college. So I guess that would be against. But putting her in an apartment, I guess I'm guessing she had this fantasy that somehow if she put her in this white trash, her words, town, then everyone would just forget her. She would just fall into this hole of poverty and working class or white trash neighborhood, and she would just like drift away. And like, it doesn't make any sense, right? The human being is still there. Or that maybe she would ruin her life, or she would do things like become addicted to something or get involved sexually with someone, and then she could say, well, yeah, look at her, or, you know, yeah, I could see her, who knows, it's all just speculative. But anyway, let's see what he says here. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.